Experience it.
Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Well, last Monday, Pope Benedict XVI, leader of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics, abruptly announced that he was to resign the papacy on February the 28th. The Pope said that he is quitting because he no longer has the strength to fulfill the duties of his office. His statement said that he had noticed that his strength had deteriorated over recent months. He is the first pontiff since the Middle Ages, actually the early 1400s, more than 600 years ago, and I might add, before Columbus even sailed to find the New World, to take such a step. His resignation is stunning because popes do not traditionally walk away from the office. Their lifeless bodies are carried out. The 85-year-old German-born pope has been hailed as a conservative hero for the Catholic cause because of his devotion to the traditional doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church. On the other hand, he has been regarded with suspicion by liberals who say that his old-fashioned religious ideals have set back the reforms of the church by 50 years. Pope Benedict faced an uphill battle when he came to the papal throne because he followed one of history's most popular pontiffs, Pope John Paul II. Further, his time in office has been beset by a child sexual abuse crisis that tarnished the church. One speech early on in which he upset Muslims, and a scandal over the leaking of his private papers by his personal butler. In a statement from the Vatican, the Pope said that in order to govern, both strength of mind and body are necessary, strength which in the last few months has deteriorated in me to the extent that I have had to recognize my incapacity to adequately fulfill the ministry entrusted to me. For this reason, and well aware of the seriousness of this act, with full freedom, I declare that I renounce the ministry of Bishop of Rome, the successor of St. Peter. Church representatives said that the Pope is not suffering from any particular catastrophic malady or debilitating condition. Observers have noted, however, that the Pope has grown increasingly frail. He uses a cane and no longer walks the aisle of St. Peter's to perform services, but is rolled in and out of the cathedral. His doctors have also advised him to make no more transatlantic trips. The Pope himself has previously told interviewers that he feels that a pope should resign if he reaches a point where he cannot fully perform the functions of the Church's highest office. I suppose that means that Benedict is practicing what he preached. A Vatican spokesman said the pontiff would step down at 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Thursday, February 28th. The office will be vacant until a successor is chosen by the College of Cardinals, meeting in top secret, closed-door sessions. Benedict was elected to the papacy on April 19, 2005. He was 78 years old, 20 years older than John Paul II was when he was elected. Observers agree that Benedict ruled over a slower-paced, more cerebral, and less active Vatican. While the church conservatives cheered him for trying to reaffirm traditional Catholic identity, his critics accused him of turning back the clock on reforms and hurting the dialogue with Muslims, Jews, and other Christians. Some say his papacy is simply an extension of John Paul's because he was such a close confidant and reliable ally of his predecessor. In fact, he had tried to retire before John Paul died, but his longtime friend and spiritual leader convinced him to stay on and help him accomplish the goals of his papacy. Before he was elected Pope to succeed his friend John Paul II, the former Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger was known by such critical epithets as God's Rottweiler because of his stern stand on traditional theological issues. While it's true that the Benedict's stunning decision to go against centuries of papal tradition and step down from office makes for intriguing speculation, the intrigue is heightened by an obscure and ancient prophecy known as St. Malachy's prophecy of the popes. Over the past 4 years, I've discussed this extra-biblical prediction on 3 occasions. In fact, I devoted time on this program to it as recently as January 11th of this year. I want to replay for you a segment from Hal Lindsey report of November 4th, 2011, in which I described in detail exactly what St. Malachy's prophecy entails and why it is relevant to this week's events. I want to begin tonight with a very unusual prophecy that I last discussed a couple of years ago. I believe it has much more relevance today in the light of the growing economic problems besieging the European Union. It's called the Prophecy of the Popes and is a Vatican document that is credited to St. Malachy. He was the 12th century Bishop of Armad in what is now Northern Ireland. Now let me be clear from the start that I am not saying that this man's prophecy rises to the same level of detail and accuracy as those in the Bible. However, it does contain some remarkable predictions that seem to have been fulfilled across the centuries and may bear relevance for today. According to the traditional account, in 1139, Malachy was summoned to Rome by Pope Innocent II. While in Rome, Malachy purportedly experienced a vision of future popes, which he recorded as a sequence of cryptic phrases. This manuscript was then deposited in the Roman archive and forgotten about until it was rediscovered in 1590. The list is said to name every pope from Malachy's time to the very last pope, which he called Peter the Roman. This is Malachy's prophecy regarding Peter translated from the Latin. Peter the Roman, who will nourish the sheep in many tribulations, when they are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. According to Malachy's description, Peter the Roman will be the pope who will work with the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 17, verse 16, predicts that the Antichrist and the 10-nation confederacy out of the old Roman Empire will eventually turn upon the false religious system and its leader and utterly destroy it, just as Malachy predicted. I again want to stress that the prophecy of the popes was delivered by a Roman Catholic bishop and has been maintained in the Vatican's archives since its rediscovery in at least 1590. It was certainly not concocted by some anti-Catholic Protestant. Some Catholic encyclopedia claim that it's a forgery. But if it were a forgery, why has it been housed and guarded in the Vatican archives? And most importantly, it cannot be dated any later than 1590. So if this prophecy is a forgery, it still has remarkable predictions about our present times that are over 400 years old. For example, Pope number 263 was Pope John the 23rd, whom Malachy described as a shepherd and sailor. His real name was Angelo Roncalli, and he was the son of sharecroppers and shepherds. Before being elected Pope, Cardinal Roncalli was named Patriarch of Venice, the famed canal city and seaport. Malachy described Pope 264, Pope Paul VI, as the flower of flowers. The coat of arms of the Montini family, from which he came, featured 3 flowers. Pope number 265 was Pope John Paul I. Malachy described his pontificate as the midst of the moon. On the day of John Paul I's election, the moon was half full. Albino Luciani, or John Paul I, died 1 month later under another half moon. Pope John Paul II was Pope number 266. He was identified by Malachy as being from the labor of the sun. Karol Wojtyła was born on the day of a solar eclipse. Pope number 267 is the current pontiff, Pope Benedict XVI. Before John Paul II died, I looked up what Malachy had to say about his successor, the 267th Pope. Malachy linked this pope to the glory of the olive. One of the nicknames of the Benedictine order is that of the Olivetans. So when Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger chose as his papal name Pope Benedict, it was startling. This order links itself to a love of the olive. The next pope will be Pope number 268. According to St. Malachy, this pope will be Peter the Roman, the last pope. Peter the Roman will reign, according to Malachy's prophecies, during the horrific time of tribulation that immediately precedes the second coming of Christ. How far off might the fulfillment of Malachy's prophecy be? Well, the current Pope, Benedict XVI, will be 85 years old come April. When I return after the break, I'll answer a simple question that you may be asking yourself right now. If Hal's not a Catholic, why does he care who the next Pope will be?
Hal Lindsey Media Ministries is pleased to announce yet another easy way for you to support the Hal Lindsey Report. Our new toll-free telephone number, 1-888-RAPTURE. By calling this toll-free number, you can obtain copies of the show on DVD. You can also give a tax-deductible gift or designate a monthly pledge to help keep this program on the air. Supporting the Hal Lindsey Report has never been easier. Operators are standing by 24 hours a day, ready to take your call. So call today, toll-free, 1-888-RAPTURE or 1-888-727-8873. Please call today.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.
So you may be asking yourself, if I'm not a Catholic, why should I care who the next Pope will be? If you're interested in the end times prophetic scenario, however, it's obvious why you should be at least curious. Simply put, if St. Malachy's vision is accurate, that means we're on the threshold of the final events of the church age. Now, for many, many years, for 50 some odd years, I've been studying what would be all of the pieces of a puzzle in prophecy that would fit together and indicate that we're near the great tribulation, which will take place just before the return of Christ. And I can tell you that all of those pieces of the puzzle in Bible prophecy are together right now. There is just the last piece, which is the revival of the old Roman Empire, and with it, the rise of the Antichrist. But I noted in restudying Revelation chapter 17, something that needs to really be emphasized. First of all, it talks about the great harlot and who and what the great harlot is. And so it talks about a woman who is a harlot who is riding a scarlet-colored beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations of the unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of saints and with the blood of witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you. And then it goes on to explain these things. It says, the beast you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. Those who dwell on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was, is not, and yet will come. Now the beast refers to the progress of ancient empires that are very much a part of prophecy. They succeed one another. And the final beast, which is the revived form of the Roman Empire, and the Antichrist that comes up out of this empire. But he says here, here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Rome has been called the city of the 7 hills from ancient times. And it says the woman sits on those 7 hills. As I've talked about many times, how I was studying about this in the mid-1950s, and I was pondering as I was studying this about what does this mean, the woman sits on 7 hills? And I walked by the old Rice Hotel on Main Street in Houston, Texas. And I looked up, there was a Pan American Airlines ticket office, and it had a poster which says, come see the city of the 7 hills. And then it had Rome under it. And I said, thank you, Lord, that's it. And truly, that is part of it. Even Malachy, by the way, speaks of the Roman church being destroyed and calls it the city on the 7 hills. And so he says also in verse 10 of Revelation 17, and they are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. The 7 heads represent 7 kingdoms. 5 have fallen. Well, that would have been, these are the powers that had influence over Israel. Assyria, Egypt, then Neo-Babylonian, followed by the Medo-Persian, the Macedonian Greek under Alexander the Great, and then the Roman Empire phase 1, and then it says it would go be in a mystery form, and then it would come back at the end time as the Roman Empire phase 2. Now it's important to see that the woman is sitting on the beast, which in its last form it refers and is a figure of the Antichrist. It says she is sitting on the beast and riding it. So this means that the symbol of the woman sitting on the 7 hills, she is actually in charge of the revived Roman Empire at the end, and she is even in charge of the Antichrist, which will rise at that time, the Antichrist and the false prophet. And so it shows that the beast will be the Antichrist, but the church will actually have power over the Antichrist until something that is said here that very few people discuss. In Revelation chapter 17, it talks about the 10 horns, which are 10 kings that rise at the same time politically as the Antichrist. And it says that the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, the Antichrist, these will hate the harlot, which refers to the false church. And the city which that woman represents is mentioned in Revelation 17:18. The woman whom you saw is the great city, which is reigning literally over the kings of the earth. Well, the great city could only be Rome, specifically the Vatican, which sits on the 7 hills and has been the mystery form of the Roman Empire since politically it fell in the 5th century AD. So we see here that originally the next thing we will see is a revival of the Roman Empire. That fits in exactly what I've said for over 50 years, that the Roman Empire phase 2 cannot be revived until the United States begins to fade and become a second-rate power. This will force the powers of Europe to come together, and it will be the mystery form of the old Roman Empire, which has existed all this time, the woman, the harlot, which is the Roman Catholic Church. And that is how it will have the power to pull together all of the dysfunctional nations within the European Union and be able to pull it together. And as this is pulled together politically as a revival of the old Roman Empire, it will also help the Antichrist and the false prophet to rise at the same time. And it will have power over them until they rebel and destroy the whole Roman Church. Now, you can't get away from it. Even Malachy, who was a Catholic and who, had no axe to grind against the Catholic Church, said that when the last pope would rise, he would call himself Peter the Roman, and that during his reign, the city on the 7 hills would be destroyed. That's the same thing as predicted in Revelation, that the Antichrist will throw off its control over him and destroy it. Folks, I believe all of this is being set up right before us now. Now, as I've said many times, the Roman Church is a system. And within that system, there are people who have come to know Jesus Christ and are truly born again. So we're not talking about the people. We're talking about the system. But you go back in history, this system is guilty of many of the things that Revelation chapter 17 says about the blood of the saints. Now, I believe we're getting very, very near that time when all of this is coming together. So that's, can this really happen? Can a pope be powerful enough to shape the world opinion and events to assist the rise of the beast? John Paul II used his power in league with Ronald Reagan to shape Europe in the 1980s and bring down the Soviet Union. That proves that it can be done because it has been done. Ronald Reagan alone couldn't have brought down the Soviet Union. And the Pope couldn't have brought down the Soviet Union by himself. But when he saw that his home country, Poland, was being persecuted and the Soviet Union was trying to take it over, he said, I'll take off my cassock and lead an army against you myself. And that helped bring down the Soviet Union. So I believe that all of these things are coming together. Now, this is why I've been so interested in this ancient Catholic bishop's predictions, Malachy's predictions. They've been remarkably accurate, at least in the last 400 years. And so as some people say it's a fraud, it's not real. Well, since 1590 at least, we can follow what Malachy predicted about the successive popes, and they are remarkable in their accuracy. And now we face a new situation where at last we've come to the 112th pope since Malachy's time, since Celestine II, who was the first of these popes in his prophecy, was there. Now we've come to the 112th pope since his time. And whether his prophecies are accurate or not, they're not the same as biblical prophecy. But whether they're accurate or not is going to be told within a few weeks. Because if he's right, it will not be, the church is pushing to appoint as pope someone from either Africa or Latin America. And there's a very strong movement within the church that this time they elect a pope from those places. Well, if they do, we'll know that Malachy's prophecy really wasn't true. But if against odds, an Italian will be elected pope and name himself Peter and be called Peter the Roman, then we know that this prophecy is actually agreeing with what we already know from Bible prophecy, and that is that we are very near the time of Christ coming for his true church before the beginning of the last 7 years of catastrophic events, which will end with the personal return of Christ to the earth. I'll be back in a moment. Thank you so much for standing with me as a watchman on the wall. I thank God for sending me such loyal partners, and I pray daily that he will reward your faithfulness and protect and prosper you in these very difficult times. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. Well, that's it for tonight. I'll be talking more about this subject, so keep in touch with my website, hallindsey.com, and you might do a little study on this whole issue for yourself. St. Malachy's prophecies of the Pope. A truly interesting thing, and I have yet to see what was the Lord's full purpose for having this come, but I do believe that St. Malachy must have been a believer. So do take a close look at it. God bless you, and God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.